Welcome back. On this day in history, October 20th, 1947, the House Un-American Activities Committee opens public hearings on alleged communist infiltration in Hollywood. Katharine Hepburn, Charlie Chaplin, and Edward G. Robinson among those called in to testify. Also called in to testify was Screen Actors Guild President Ronald Reagan, who denies that leftists ever controlled the guild and refuses to label anyone a communist.
I will be frank with you that as a citizen, I would hesitate, or I would not like to see any political party outlawed on the basis of its political ideology, because we've spent 170 years in this country on the basis that democracy is strong enough to stand up and fight for itself against the inroads of any ideology, no matter how much we may disagree with it. But at the same time, I never, as a citizen, want to see our country become so, or become urged by either fear or resentment of this group that we ever compromise with any of our democratic principles through that fear or resentment.
We agree.
I still think that democracy can do it.
In the late 40s, he was president of the Screen Actors Guild. By 1981, he was president of the United States, Ronald Reagan. From history to the here and now, and more remarks revisited. You and I have already discussed Donald Trump's reluctance to instantly accept vote totals on election night, and the criticism from the Democrats has been deafening. But as Ed Berliner explains, those on the left really need to remember what happened in the 2000 election.
I want to ask you here on the stage tonight, do you make the same commitment that you will absolutely, sir, that you will absolutely accept the result of this election?
I will look at it at the time. I'm not looking at anything now. I'll look at it at the time.
Like it or not, when an individual seeking to be president of the United States leaves questions about the validity of the electoral system itself, it sends shockwaves through those who believe such a public failure of commitment casts aspersions and doubt on something America has long called a tenet of this democracy. Then again, it's not as if we haven't had our doubts about elections before.
CNN right now is moving our earlier declaration of Florida back to the too close to call column.
This race is simply too close to call. And until the recount is concluded and the results in Florida become official, our campaign continues.
The 2000 presidential election remains one of the greatest stains on our electoral process. From hanging chads on paper ballots to completely confused election officials to discredited conspiracy theories to what seemed like endless counts and recounts. An election that hung in the balance until the U.S. Supreme Court was called upon to settle the matter once and for all.
The court declared that the recounts violated the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause, because there was no uniform standard for counting all ballots.
But the differences between then and now are stark and simple. Al Gore never once questioned the validity of the electoral process before the vote itself, and his court challenge to the outcome was based on the chaotic events in Florida, demanding a more thorough investigation which was rightfully held. Once the court ruled, Gore conceded the outcome. And the greater issue here that seems to be escaping necessary discussion is how 16 years later, consistent election reform remains nothing more than a dream, or in the case of what is currently transpiring, something of a nightmare. JD, it's all yours.
Thanks very much, Ed. You know, there were so many memorable moments in last night's debate. We really don't want to deprive you of a second look. So we've created this compilation, and that's tonight's prime playback.
Finally, will Donald Trump admit and condemn that the Russians are doing this and make it clear that he will not have the help of Putin in this election?
He has no respect for her. He has no respect for our president. From everything I see, has no respect for this person.
Well, that's because he'd rather have a puppet as president of the United States.
No puppet.
And it's pretty clear.
You're the puppet.
It's pretty clear you won't admit that the Russians have engaged in cyber attacks against the United States of America.
She doesn't like Putin because Putin has outsmarted her at every step of the way. Excuse me. Putin has outsmarted her in Syria. He's outsmarted her every step of the way. I'd like to mention one thing. Trump Foundation, small foundation. People contribute. I contribute. The money goes 100% goes to different charities, including a lot of military. I don't get anything. I don't buy boats. I don't buy planes.
But of course, there's no way we can know whether any of that is true because he hasn't released his tax returns. He is the first candidate ever to run for president in the last 40-plus years who has not released his tax returns. So everything he says about charity or anything else, we can't prove it.
It's a criminal enterprise. Saudi Arabia giving $25 million, Qatar, all of these countries. You talk about women and women's rights. So these are people that push gays off buildings. These are people that kill women and treat women horribly.
And I'd be happy to compare what we do with the Trump Foundation, which took money from other people and bought a 6-foot portrait of Donald. I mean, who does that? It just was astonishing.
It is just horrible what's happened to these people in these communities. Now, she can say that her husband did well, but boy, did they suffer as NAFTA kicked in, because it didn't really kick in very much, but it kicked in after they left. Boy, did they suffer.
Donald has bought Chinese steel and aluminum. In fact, the Trump hotel right here in Las Vegas was made with Chinese steel. So he goes around with crocodile tears about how terrible it is, but he has given jobs to Chinese steel workers, not American steel workers.
Mr. Trump?
You were very much involved, excuse me, my turn. You were very much involved in every aspect of this country, very much. And you do have experience. I'd say the one thing you have over me is experience, but it's bad experience.
In the 1980s, I was working to reform the schools in Arkansas. He was borrowing $14 million from his father to start his businesses.
What I've seen is so bad. First of all, the media is so dishonest and so corrupt, and the pile-on is so amazing.
There was even a time when he didn't get an Emmy for his TV program 3 years in a row, and he started tweeting that the Emmys were rigged against him.
Should have gotten it.
Are you saying you're not prepared now to commit
What
to
I'm
that
saying
principle?
is that I will tell you at the time. I'll keep you in suspense.
Well, at the last debate, we heard Donald talking about what he did to women. And after that, a number of women have come forward saying that's exactly what he did to them.
I believe, Chris, that she got these people to step forward. If it wasn't, they get their 10 minutes of fame. But they were all totally, it was all fiction. It was lies and it was fiction.
He went on to say, look at her. I don't think so. About another woman, he said, that wouldn't be my first choice. He attacked the woman reporter writing the story, called her disgusting, as he has called a number of women during this campaign.
Frankly, those stories have been largely debunked, and I really want to just talk about something slightly different. She mentions this, which is all fiction, all fictionalized, probably or possibly started by her and her very sleazy campaign. But I will tell you, what isn't fictionalized are her emails, where she destroyed 33,000 emails criminally.
Every time Donald is pushed on something which is obviously uncomfortable, like what these women are saying, he immediately goes to denying responsibility. And it's not just about women. He never apologizes or says he's sorry for anything.
She shouldn't be allowed to run. She's guilty of a very, very serious crime. She should not be allowed to run. And just in that respect, I say it's rigged, because she should never, Chris, she should never have been allowed to run for the presidency based on what she did with emails and so many other things.
The last time they meet face-to-face to debate, next time they face the voters, the first Tuesday following the first Monday in November, which this year is November 8th. Now, tomorrow at 1 o'clock Eastern on America Talks Live, pollster John Zogby, former CIA analyst Fred Fleitz, a presidential scholar and senior fellow in law and policy Mark Smith, plus your phone calls. We love hearing you. That's 1 o'clock Eastern tomorrow on America Talks Live. Of course, I'll be looking for you at 8 o'clock too on Newsmax Prime. Stay brave, stay free, stay tuned.